you want only the war years. You don't want to talk about before the war years.
Yes, sir. This interview is being conducted for the Veterans History Project for the Library of Congress. The veteran's name is Milton Georgion. He was born on April 27th, 1925. He served in World War II. He achieved the rank of Navy Lieutenant. We are recording this on 3/19/13, and I'm Will Hines, and I'm conducting this interview. No relation. So, Mr. Georgion, how did you decide to enlist and fight and join up to fight in World War II?
Well, being 17 when the war was really going on, everybody wanted to get in the fight.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you're 17 years old, you want to get in there.
How did you convince your parents to let you?
Well, my dad helped me decide that. He said, if you don't do something, you're going to be drafted and then you're going to be killed in 1 year over in Iwo Jima somewhere. And why don't you do something rather than just do nothing?
Mm-hmm.
So he brought home a poster one day of join the Navy and become a naval aviator. And if you're 17 and still in high school, senior in high school, you're the top 10% of your class, then you can join the Navy, and then you're not called until you're 18, and you can go to flight school, become a naval aviator. And we thought, hey, that's great. Didn't have the slightest idea of what it meant, but it sounded good. So that's how I joined the Navy. So we went, well, you had to drive to Atlanta because there was some special selection for naval aviation cadets.
Mm-hmm. And you lived in Polk County at the
Yeah,
time?
in Polk County.
So did you go to Polk County High School?
No, went to either Christ School or private school up in Asheville, or also the Rutherford High School, Rutherford, right next door.
Wow. So you decided to join up as a 17-year-old,
Right.
and you drove to Atlanta? Or how did that
Well, I
happen?
didn't drive, but my dad and I drove. And spent the night there and went through the testing program the next day. They did everything you can imagine to you. You know, put you in a barber chair and whirl you around and check your perception and your hearing and all your physical, and just gave you a real once-over. And I said, okay, you'll be an aviation cadet after a year, after a day of that. And then my troubles began, because by then so many people had gotten into that program.
Mm-hmm.
There was a backlog of people.
Mm.
So they put me in a holding status. And then after the holding status, they sent me to Chapel Hill for a year. Why did I send me to Chapel Hill? Well, that's where the pre-flight school is. And we can't get you to pre-flight school now because we're crowded. So we're going to send you to Chapel Hill for a year, which is great. I got about 2 years of credit doing that. Going 6 days a week.
Wow.
And after it was all over, I ended up getting my wings and commission out of Pensacola.
So after a year of being at Chapel Hill, then you went to flight school?
Went to pre-flight school.
Pre-flight school, okay. And
Georgia.
what did y'all do at pre-flight school? How long was it? Kind of what?
Well, pre-flight school was supposed to be 3 months, but there again we had a backlog of people, so it took 6 months.
Hmm.
And you learn all the kinds of hand-to-hand combat and survival training, and athletic training. Had to play football and play soccer and
Really?
other games, and then go to class to
Mm-hmm.
take all kinds of math courses, spherical trig, and I remember that one because I almost flunked it. Just a jam-packed year full of Navy requirements.
And that's
Of
a
course,
pre-flight
drilling,
school?
military duty and all that part.
And that's at pre-flight school?
Yeah, that was at University of Georgia.
So after you graduated pre-flight school, then you went?
Then went to primary training at Norman, Oklahoma.
Cool.
So now I'm going to learn to fly. So there I learned to fly the bi-wing Stearman plane, which we have a picture of. And you solo in it after about 5 or 6 hours of instruction. You solo, and then you think you're just wonderful. And we stayed there for, maybe 4 or 5 months. And you learn the basics of landing and formation of flying and night flying and emergencies and some basic aerobatics.
Mm-hmm.
And that lasted about 5 to 6 months.
So you learned about the plane that you were going to fly. Did you fly that plane when you were?
Not yet.
Not
No,
yet.
that comes way on down the line.
Hmm. So what year is this when you're learning how to fly? Just about the end of 43?
44, 45.
Oh.
So see, it was a whole year I was at Chapel Hill
I forgot.
doing nothing but going to school.
Yeah.
That was what was frustrating. So when you want to get into the war, we all did, that was very frustrating.
Mm-hmm. So then you went to flight school and you got your wings. Is that correct?
Well, that went stage 1.
Stage.
Then we went to Corpus Christi, Texas for stage 2. Came back to Pensacola for stage 3. Advanced training, and that's where I got my wings and commission, Pensacola. And that wasn't until 1946. So I had all the backlog again. I went through single engine training, carrier-based training, multi-engine training, navigation, on and on and on. You wouldn't believe how much delay we had, and it was very frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
You come home on leave and people say, well, you been to the war yet? No. Where have you been? Well, I've been in pre-flight school or I've been in something else.
Mm-hmm. How did you learn how to land on a carrier? Like, did they do that in flight school? Did they?
Yeah, that was at Pensacola. You learn to land a conventional plane just out on the straight runway.
But in a short
But you have
space.
a short distance, and you learn to drop it in just at the right time. You learn to fly real low and slow. You fly around just slightly above the stalling speed. And sometimes you make a mistake, like I clipped the top out of a pine tree one time because it got a little too low. But you're trying to fly real low and slow, and you learn to do it. And the first time I landed on a carrier, we had to make 6 landings to qualify. So I held up 4, but it was 6, 6 landings to qualify. And that was just in a training plane. Then you go back to, I went to it was then Banana River Naval Air Station in Florida to learn to fly the torpedo bomber. And you go through that training and learn to land it on a carrier the same way. You first land it on an open field, and then you go one day out to the carrier,
Mm-hmm.
and they say, today you're going to land it on the carrier. And you do. Maybe don't think you can, but you can. And then later on you learn to do it at night.
Land on a carrier at night?
Yeah, that's what will turn your hair gray.
Yeah.
I had black hair before that. But learn to land on a carrier at night, and you don't have any landing lights, you don't have any floodlights, you don't have any, all you have is you and the carrier. And
How did you see?
well, you judge by, you have one light up on top of the forecastle, and you have a little running light on the port and starboard side,
Mm-hmm.
and you just judge, that's part of your training, is to judge what you have and land accordingly.
Did you have many friends crash ever
Well,
trying
yeah,
to land on a
yeah.
carrier?
I didn't, but a lot of people did. But one of the moments I remember so clearly is the first time I landed on a carrier at night, because you weren't sure you were over the carrier even.
Mm-hmm. Oh, God.
You're flying along, and you know it's the time, and the landing signal officer gives you the signal to cut your throttle, and you cut your throttle, and okay, here we go, Lord, just you and me. And bam, you hit the deck, and that's good.
That's very
That's
good.
good.
So, you learned how to land on a carrier, and then were you assigned after that?
Yeah, I was assigned to torpedo bombers and went to the West Coast.
Now, how did you train for torpedo bombing? Did you drop dummy torpedoes?
Yeah, a couple of ways, but you mainly learn the flying, the approach patterns, and what speed and altitude you need to be to drop it. You drop a torpedo too high or too low, and it won't enter the water right.
How high were you supposed to be above?
About 450 feet, and could be a little higher, but about 450 feet.
Because sometimes, I see in the movies that they're like 20 feet above the water.
You could do well if you're coming in to do one. You'd like to get under the water because they're all shooting at you.
Right. Well, yeah.
But about 200 feet is not much more than treetop level here.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
you finally you practice with real torpedoes, except you never have a warhead in them.
Mm-hmm.
And you drop them on dummy ships that would be out there, or actual ships that were out there, and you learn to lead them just like shooting a shotgun.
Mm-hmm.
Learn to lead them, and you get pretty good at it.
So the ships would be moving, and how do you know if you hit it? Did they tell you?
Yeah, you have spotters that can tell you, and they can follow the wake of the torpedo. A spotter plane circling around would follow your wake and see if it followed the ship. You don't literally hit the ship. You try to go under it.
Okay.
Or the torpedo is set to go under it. Maybe it's set 30 feet deep or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm. So, what do you mean the torpedo is set to go 30 feet under it? Is it?
Well, the
is it
torpedo
angled
will
as-
go as deep as you set it to be. It has gyroscopes in it and things
Mhm.
like that, so you can set it to go on the surface, or 10 feet, or 20
really?
feet, or 30 feet. And you drop it, and it's gonna do that if you drop it right. And if you don't drop it right, it'll porpoise or maybe dive to the bottom and do all kinds of problems. So that's what you try not to do.
Mm-hmm. And did you have another person in your plane? Didn't you?
During
you
all
had
this training, no, didn't have to. Sometime I'd have a crewman ride with me just for experience,
Mm-hmm.
but you didn't have to, just in training.
And in your plane that you ended up flying, did you have a tail gunner?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. We had a ball turret on top of the plane,
Mm-hmm.
and that was, if we were actually out over the ocean and doing something that required it, he would be there and armed and do it. But most of the time it was just training, and you didn't even need a turret gunner. But many times a crewman would want to ride with you just to experience it. I think they were braver than I was, just wanting to fly with anybody.
Mm-hmm. So you were out west, and did you say you were in California?
Yeah, mainly out of San Diego and Seattle and San Francisco. And the carrier that I was on, the Tarawa, USS Tarawa CV-40, was assigned to San Diego.
Mm-hmm.
And we would go out from there and go on cruises and not stay terribly long, but
And this is in 47?
yeah, 46, 47, and then I stayed on the end to the end of 48.
So did you decided to leave the military instead of keep staying?
I've been on this so long looking for a war, and I didn't get shot at,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't shoot anybody, and I guess thank God for all that. So I think I'll stay in and wait for another war. But it didn't come, and I got out just before the Korean.
Korea. Well,
So probably lucky me.
yeah. Well, I don't know. But you did want to fight, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, young, that's what you want to do when you're 17, 18, 19.
Yes, sir. So when you went out, and you said at the end of 48.
Yeah.
You what did you do from there?
Well, I wanted to get back into college and finish up, but Chapel Hill was so crowded with veterans coming back, I couldn't get in. So I went to Washington to live with my sister, and went to George Washington University for a year. And while I was there, I flew in the Naval Reserve at Anacostia Naval Air Station in Washington. and enjoyed that, getting flight time and cross countries and all that.
Have you flown much since?
No, not really. I did fly in the reserve when I came back south to the Spartanburg area too. I was in the reserve, but not much. Too expensive to do it on your own, and you get married, you start having children, and that conflicts with the time required to be in the Naval Reserve and all that. So I finally just gave it up.
So how was life on a carrier? I have no clue. Oh.
Really, it was good. Almost too good to be true. You eat like a king. You have, especially the air people, like I did. I didn't have the normal shipboard duties.
Right.
And
what would you do for fun on the carrier?
you really kill time. You write letters and you read and you have athletics down on the hangar deck or up on the flight deck.
Did the boat rock at all?
Very slowly.
Yeah.
You know, a big ship like that, it just creeps back and forth. When you see your coffee cup about to slide off the edge of the table, you realize you've rocked over about 80 degrees.
So how are the barracks? How did you sleep?
Yeah, sleeping quarters were good. They treated officers real well. And I mean, we didn't have private quarters, but just about like living in college dorms. You had anywhere from 4 to 10 people in one area, and they each had their own private bunk and just a tiny little bit of storage space.
How long would y'all go out whenever you left port?
It would depend. It would be for a day or it could be for a month, but it just varied, whatever the mission was.
And did you fly during that time while you were out at all?
Yeah. Always did, because no matter where you were, you're still in training.
Right.
So we would go out and sometimes fly. Well, I remember one time we were out at night, and some of the people had not had night carrier landing experience. So, okay, tonight we're gonna land on the carrier. Got to do it twice to qualify. So we get way out on the west coast somewhere, I don't know, halfway to Hawaii, and black is pitch, and we launch all aircraft, and of course you're a single man in a single plane. It's not B-27s and B-29s and all that. And you come in and you make your landings.
And you had already qualified before this, right?
No, this is the first night.
Oh.
Yeah. I had not qualified at night. And I remember when I landed the second time, I thought I'd blown a tire because I heard something go shh. I blew a tire. Then I realized I had a death grip on my throttle, which had a microphone switch on it, and I had it open, and that was me exhaling on my microphone.
Wow.
Because you have a lip mic. And,
Yeah, how was the gear? What gear did you wear to fly in?
Nothing exotic like the astronauts do. We had like jumpsuits, very simple canvas type jumpsuits. We always had life preservers on, hard hats. I've got one in the other room, a fiberglass hard hat. And if it's going to be cold, you'd wear a leather jacket. But if you're out over the South Pacific, you're not worried about the cold. You just don't wear any more than you have to.
How long?
Just wear normal stuff.
How long was your average flight time? If you would go out and fly, would it be for 2 hours, or did it just depend?
Normally 2 hours to 4 hours. That range, 2 to 4 hours.
That's a long time to be in a...
Well, yeah. It gives you cause to think a little bit when you're out there over the Pacific at night. It's just you and God in the airplane.
Yes, you can pray a lot while you're
You
there.
see some beautiful things, like a thunderstorm at night over the ocean is one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen.
Really?
It lights up like the thunderstorm lights up like electric light. And it does it in slow motion. It lights up and then it shrinks back down again.
How small were the planes? Were they pretty cramped, or did you have?
Enough room to be comfortable. The plane itself, the wingspan would be like 54 feet, I'm sorry. Wingspan, but the pilot seats were made to be comfortable for the pilot. Almost as much, well, about as much as inside this chair. Not as big as a whole chair.
Mm-hmm.
And there you are. It's comfortable.
Good. You didn't have any machine guns on your plane, right? It was just strictly a torpedo
No, they
bomber.
used to, and they did, and then they took them off because the torpedo bombers got that maneuverable,
Mm-hmm.
and we had the machine gun in the back to fend off the enemy, but there's not much reason to have one pointing forward.
Yeah. So that's interesting. I've never really learned about a carrier like that. So you said the food was good on the carrier?
Oh yeah, great.
What kind of food would you get?
Well, what would be the best you would order if you wanted breakfast? You'd have, I want 2 eggs and ham and grits and biscuits and whatever. And that's what you have every morning.
Mm-hmm. Did y'all have like a radio on the ship? Could you get radio signal or anything?
We didn't have private radio.
Mhm.
No, we weren't allowed to do that because an enemy could track in on the radio
on the
signal.
radio signal.
Even though you were the receiver, they could track it.
Wow. What private things were you allowed to
And of
take
course,
on the
television
plane?
wasn't invented then,
Oh,
so
yeah.
that was not a problem.
What like private things were you allowed to take on the carrier? Were you allowed to take anything, or just hygiene products or stuff? Or
Just normal hygiene things: toothbrush, toothpaste, changes of underwear.
Mhm.
That's about it.
Books?
About like, well, yeah, if you had something that you could study or.
Mm-hmm. I've heard that carriers are like, they're called floating cities, and do they have like barbershop and?
Yeah,
All that
especially
stuff.
now they're much more like a floating city.
Mm-hmm.
But ours was pretty austere, and you didn't really go aboard carrier to get a haircut. You did that ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
But everything else you needed was there.
Do
You
you-
had doctors on board, dentists on board, things like that.
Do you know when your carrier was made? It's probably after.
Not
Wrong.
exactly, but about it was a World War II carrier. It was commissioned in about 1943, 44. And then it went on a shakedown cruise, and I wasn't on it the entire time of its life
Mm-hmm.
because it was commissioned, I think, in Boston, and then came to the West Coast, and that's where I joined up with it in San Diego.
Did you have many friends that fought in the war that were able to fight?
Well, yeah, quite a few. Some were in my squadron too. We flew together, and they had been in the war, and we joined up together. But then an awful lot of friends of mine, just from high school days and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Just a lot of them. Not that many injuries. Most of them, if you got shot in World War II, you just died. And the recovery, since then is, if you have any breath of life nowadays, it can revive you and save you on the battlefield and at sea and all that. But then it was pretty much if you got shot, that's it. And I didn't realize it until afterwards, but the torpedo bomber was the most dangerous plane you could fly in, I believe.
It
You
was.
come in at low level,
They can just.
slow,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody is firing at you. But I thought that's just great. But that's a 17, 18, 19-year-old mentality. It was just wonderful. We're fighting the war. We're fighting the enemy. We know who the enemy is. Now we don't know who the enemy is, I don't think.
Now what is this picture right here? Is this you said this is in front of the plane you flew?
Yeah, this is the TBM. And
And-
that was
Which one is you?
I'm in the middle, and this was my mechanic,
Mm-hmm.
and this is the crewman that would fly with me in the turret in the back, gunner.
Mm-hmm.
And,
That's a pretty big plane.
yeah, it was the largest single-engine plane in World War II.
Wow.
The largest single-engine plane.
Now, did you have fighter pilots on the carrier too?
Oh yeah. On a carrier, you normally have like, fighter squadron, torpedo squadron, dive bomber squadron. But you normally have 2 fighter squadrons of about 20 to 25 planes each.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'd have a torpedo squadron of about 20 to 25 planes. And then you'd have a dive bomber squadron of 20 to 25 planes. So you're up there about 80 planes is the air group.
What were the fighter planes on your carrier? What were they? Were they Corsair?
We like the Grumman planes, but
Grumman.
F6F. But we use some of the carrier, some of the Corsairs too, but they're pretty.
Mm-hmm.
They're inverted gull wing, and they're beautiful, but they're not as rugged as a
Right.
F6F.
Did you ever get to fly any of the fighter planes?
Never had the opportunity. You know, you would think you would, but you don't just decide to go out and drive a new car the next day.
Right.
You got to go back and go through all the training that's required to get there before you just jump into that kind of plane.
It
So
seems
that-
like it'd be very similar though, right? That kind of plane would
Oh, yeah,
be very similar to the fighter.
But the Navy wouldn't let you just hop in another one.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Try it out. Like if you want to borrow your dad's car or borrow your neighbor's car or something.
Mm-hmm.
No, you didn't do that. It was all very carefully controlled.
Wow. Oh. Well. So you were stationed in California and your carrier went out in the Pacific
Mm-hmm.
strictly. Did you ever travel anywhere else on the carrier?
Never went to Europe. Never did anything other than European theater. Just,
Did your carrier ever go to Hawaii?
yeah, did. But that was a luxury trip. You didn't really say, let's go to Hawaii today. You may or may not. But it was some other interesting things to me, at least. We got assigned to Seattle for a while to the torpedo squadron got assigned to Seattle for a while to look for floating Japanese mines. The war had ended, and there were problems with floating Japanese mines, and we would go out and search for Japanese mines. And
How would you spot them? Were they just
well, you just look and see. There's
What do they look
what
like?
is that funny looking thing bobbing in the water? Because you're flying around at maybe 500 to 1,000 feet, so you can see what looks like a piece of a bathtub floating around in the water.
Did you ever spot any?
Yeah, you do, and you report it where they are. And I also was on a training mission one time, and we were using not tremendous bombs, but small practice bombs, and looking for. They were reported a Japanese submarine that had sunk and was still floating around out in the Pacific. We were looking for it, and we were looking for it, and I came across what I thought it was and it turned out to be a whale. And a whale coming up out of the water, coming up in the water, looks exactly like a submarine.
Right, makes sense.
Water pours off of it. It's the same color.
Mhm.
And here I did a diving turn. I was going to bomb that booger.
I'm glad you didn't kill
But it
one.
wasn't. It was a whale. So I let it go. So my friends kid me a lot now.
Mhm.
Well, at least you got to bomb a whale like that. I didn't kill it.
That's good.
I don't think I even scared it good.
Now, did you have a torpedo on, or
No,
were you actually dropping a bomb?
These are bombs with small charges,
So did you go through bomb training too, with,
torpedoes.
or just
Yeah.
bomb, like not even
Oh
torpedoes?
yeah, we did a lot of dive bombing practice.
Okay, so the same plane would be able to dive bomb.
Oh yeah, yeah. We didn't have dive brakes, and you've got to have that. So we were told and learned to put our landing gear down. So when you say if you're 10,000 feet and you start
Diving.
way down in a steep dive, maybe 75-degree angle, which feels like you're standing on your head when you're coming down at that angle. You put your landing gear down so you don't exceed the dangerous speed to pull your wings off.
Wow.
And yeah, we got a lot of dive bomber training and rocket training. We fired a lot of rockets and
Really?
learned how to do that. We'd go out in the desert and shoot at tanks that were hidden in the hills.
That sounds fun to me.
Oh yeah, it's fine. They didn't shoot back at you.
Mm-hmm. That's definitely.
But all in all, I left there disappointed that I really didn't get into combat. I always feel guilty about that. But
Well, you tried.
my only claim to fame is I did everything they told me to do. And that's my claim to fame.
Well, you tried to get in, and I admire you for that.
So that's the story.
Well, thank you so much.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you for your time.
Okay.